What's up, nerds? Welcome to DNA Pow Block, our all Nintendo show. I am one of your hosts, Corey Derrick, and alongside me, as always, is Edward Varnell. Edward, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you, Corey. Hello, everybody.
Just the two of us today.
Just the two of us.
Ha! Yeah. It's going to be kind of a shorter episode today, but we're going to talk a little bit about Nintendo 64's 20th anniversary this year. But first, we kind of want to get some emotional stuff out of the way. As of yesterday, right?
Yes, July 11th.
Satoru Iwata has been passed for 1 year. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about his importance to Nintendo because, Nintendo is a very important company to a lot of us, especially us and the rest of the DNA crew. And then, most of the community, we all love Nintendo a lot. And sometimes it's frustrating to watch this company, but it's frustration out of love because we just want to see this company succeed. And we have such fondness over their properties and their franchises and their IP and that's the whole reason why we started Pow Block was to show our love and dedication to Nintendo. But Iwata for a long time was the face of this company, not only from like a business perspective, but from a gamer, almost like he was one of us almost. So he just ran the company, and he was a big part of their game development side for a long time, and He did a lot of things to make games run on Nintendo platforms for a long time before he became president. So Edward, I kind of want to pass it over to you. What are kind of your favorite Iwata memories and games and such?
For the way that he did Pokemon Gold and Silver, how he helped program that, with him helping out on Earthbound with Kirby. One of the best moments that I remember, and hopefully everybody can agree with me, is 2014 when they did the Smash between him and Reggie Fils-Aimé. When they were fighting to show off the Mii's. That was the first time you see kind of a president or a CEO actually get active and act like a video game character. And there was something about Iwata's charm that I loved about when he was on the Direct, that I was just like, no matter if we hated a product or was frustrated by Nintendo, there's something about him when he comes on and talks about it. You see his passion in the game, and still to this very day, he's one of the from GDC. Like, his talks is still relevant and very important to a lot of game developers.
Yeah, he's definitely, you can definitely feel him being missed, but like in terms of Nintendo, you can still feel like he's there, like especially in the direction they're moving. It's kind of like, I know they have a new president and everything, and I know they're kind of starting to move in a different direction, but at the same time, this new direction that they're moving is kind of the legacy of Iwata. We see the mobile initiative. We've seen, or at least heard, what the rumors of surrounding NX and what it might be able to do, and how Iwata influenced that, as well as like where we are now, especially with their mobile strategy.
Right. and looks to me they're becoming more open about things like Bit Summit just passed in Japan, and Nintendo was there. Nintendo's not never at Bit Summit, but they were there making a presence with their games. And I didn't get to check it out or anything, but I did see the banner that Nintendo was there. And so it kind of shows that, even after the passing of Iwata, him wanting the company to be more involved with the community and pretty much every other place, like whether it's a business decision or not, that it opens up people more to recognize that Nintendo's still closed about stuff, but they're slowly being open so people could get to know them better, like get to know their products and their games and what they're standing for. Like if you even go to PAX and stuff, it's still, when Nintendo has a booth, it's still packed. Like that's all I read from stories about PAX is that it's pretty much Nintendo.
Yeah, yeah, and even you look at E3, like Nintendo didn't have a conference, they didn't have a direct, but you see Zelda, and it's the most talked about game of the show, and all they did was build a booth around Zelda, and they took Zelda, and that was it.
And it stayed packed throughout all 3 days that they was there.
Yeah, and it's like as fond as we all are of Nintendo, I feel like Iwata had a big part in why Nintendo is still relevant in this day and age where online gaming is everything, the ecosystem you play in is everything, and like Nintendo is surviving with its different approach to gaming, and it's working. Like Wii U sales are not where they want to be, but we look at 3DS and its success, and I think like people still have a relative fondness for Nintendo. And like I'm seeing people that my mom works for, their kids are begging for Amiibo and 3DS, and they can't wait for Pokemon Sun and Moon. And like Iwata had a big hand in making Pokemon a giant franchise, especially with the gold and silver.
And even when the sales were down at Nintendo, Iwata was man enough to say, I'm taking a pay cut. I'm taking a pay salary. Like you don't see big name presidents doing that. Like, and that was, to me, that was kind of good. Because I feel like, I'm like, well, really he's not, even though Nintendo's not making the money that people think that Nintendo should be making the stuff, don't forget Nintendo has other avenues that make them money. It's not just video games, but us as a community, we kind of don't understand the business size of video games. And just because Nintendo didn't sell a lot of Wii U's, don't mean that they're not getting money from 3DS, software, food, some of the stuff that's in Japan that we don't have. They have a Pokemon cafe. You don't think Nintendo's not making no money off of that?
Right. Yeah, and like their theme park deals that are happening, and they're looking to get back into movies, and like they're spreading their IP around like they haven't done since the Super Mario movie and like really terrible cartoons. Like,
well, the cartoons are okay. I like them as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, they're not highly regarded, but they're still fun.
And
Super
I think
Mario Super Show is still fun.
Oh yeah, and I think Iwata, even though he had to deal with a lot of stuff in the business side, I think personally I think he kind of went to the developers and looked at their games and I don't know if it's true or not. I think he gave like wisdom to be like, this could be fixed and this could be better. If we have to delay it, let's delay. Because I'm like, what CEO besides the guy that we talked on about Adam Boy on DualShock, besides him, what CEO do we know that's also a businessman and a developer who really got their hands on stuff? Like, I think he probably went around and was just like different developments. It was just like, you guys can make this better if you do this and that. Like, I think if the Iwata had to roll his hands up and help Metroid Federation Force become a little bit better. We don't know yet until the game came out. I think he would have rolled his sleeves up and be like, let's get down to business and let's surpass the expectations that people have already placed on this game. I think Iwata, if he was still alive, would have done something like that.
Yeah. Man, that game looks really good though. Like the more and more I watch and like look at that game, Metroid Federation Force, it looks fun. Like it looks good. I know it's not the Metroid game everybody wants, but it looks real good. And
yeah, I just like that Iwata was, even though he was business and might not have been used to it. I like the fact that he was able to make fun of himself and be goofy. Just like to see him, even seeing him in puppet form, 2015, is still it's still charming and stuff. Like I look forward to him, even if he just said 5 minutes or something on a direct. That made me happy because I'm just like, I love him being as a president, coming in and just saying something to the people. I'm trying to connect to all the consumers and video game players.
Yeah. I miss the direct so much. I wish, like, I know we talked about it on a different episode of this or maybe another show. I don't really remember, but like the directs were kind of like Iwata's reach out to the fans. Like it's so obvious he was such a big part of getting those directs off the ground and getting them produced and getting them out, because we've had one since his passing, two maybe, maybe two.
Besides the Pokemon, I think besides individual ones, like a full-fledged kind of connected one was I think February. That was the last one of 2016.
Yeah, it's like, it's not like Nintendo doesn't have the personalities to do it. Like especially on the Western side, like Reggie and Bill Trennan are like two very personable, they're good personalities for Nintendo. I feel like they could do a lot with that. But Iwata was kind of like the heart and soul of what made those directs kind of work.
Right.
And like even if they do bring him back or they do something different with the directs, I feel like they're still going to be missing something because of him.
Well, I think the thing about it is just we're just happy to see a direct, and we happy to see the reaction. Like I feel that when they do the rest of the games for Wii U, and maybe even Breath of the Wild might be the last dedication to Iwata when it comes out, because he was there when the game was announced. He was alive. So he probably looked at the development. I think that in the game, if Anuma and probably Miyamoto, they may pay tribute in Breath of the Wild, something that's dedicated right to him. Like, so I think you could probably explore and find something that's because if I see that, I'm probably going to end up pausing the game and crying. If Iwata is in the game. Yeah. It's funny. Yesterday I went to Uno's Pizza, and I invited my friends, and I paid for the pizza and everything. And we all I got drinks. Well, I had a drink, and everybody else got drinks and stuff. And I told everybody, thank you for joining me today. It's just celebrating the passing of Iwata, in honor of his name. So and I thank them because all my friends, they play Nintendo. My one friend still has a Nintendo 64. Like, he still got the system and the cartridges. We all just toasted his name and had a good time. And then they went back to talking about Pokemon Go.
Yeah, I man, at this time last year, me and my fiance went to New York for on vacation, and it was so crazy because like I pulled out my phone to take pictures of the Nintendo World Store because we were gonna go in, but it was a Sunday and it was closed early, like because Sunday hours of stores and stuff. But like,
yeah.
I pulled out my phone to take pictures of all the Splatoon stuff because that was the big game they were pushing. And like, I opened the IGN app, and that was like the first article on the IGN app. I'm like, wait, what? Hold on.
Oh, I seen it when I seen it on Twitter last year. I yelled out loud. I'm like, wait, what? And because I have friends in Japan that's on Twitter that I follow, they posted the news, and I was just like, wait a minute. And I didn't realize that it was Monday in Japan, but it was Sunday our time. And I went with my friend and literally cried in his car because Iwata passed away. Like I literally went to Fridays to go have me a drink or two.
Yeah, and I was like, I was like in shock because I like it was such a weird it was such a weird
Yeah.
experience. It's like I was excited to go to the Nintendo World Store because we had planned to go there and we didn't realize it was closing early, but we went the next day and like there was a line around the block from the Nintendo store for people going in to because they had a memorial there for him
Uh-huh.
and they had like probably 6 or 7 like journal book type books in there for fans to write down their favorite Iwata memories and their favorite Nintendo memories. And like people were bringing in like Kirby drawings, Pokemon, stuffed animals. Like they were buying them at the store and leaving them on the memorial. They were like people brought in bananas because that iconic thing where he holds the bananas
Yeah.
up and looks at him like coloring book pages, books and photos and all kinds of stuff. And by the time I got up to the book, like I was feeling really emotional. And when I was like writing down, like, I wrote down my first memories of Pokemon and Kirby and stuff like that. And like I I smeared the ink because like I was crying a little bit because it was such an emotional event and like so many
Right.
people were like standing in line sharing stories and talking about how weird it was and like it was so crazy and it was
It
and
it
like it, I don't even know how to explain the atmosphere at the
right.
Nintendo World Store last year.
And it this is because I feel like this with Iwata and even Miyamoto. Like the day that Miyamoto passed, I feel like the end of video games is like near because I feel and Anuma, I want to kind of Numa too because he's really did a lot for the Legend of Zelda. But Miyamoto has so much has done so much for video games. Like the day that he passes, I feel like it's gonna be almost 2 weeks of mourning. Like the week of that Iwata passed, it was a full week of mourning. People were supposed to stories, podcast was coming out. People were still putting arts. It's still like, you know, I think I don't know if you could do it in Japan. Find his go to his memorial or anything and put stuff down. But people were just like still touched and hit hard that Iwata passed away. Miyamoto's is gonna be deeper, and I don't wish anything on Miyamoto at this moment or anything. But I'm just like when that time comes, it's gonna be a day where I might just like I gotta call into work. I don't know if I could talk to people or anything because one of the inspirations for Nintendo and one of my all-time heroes as a developer is Miyamoto. And like losing him is like losing Nintendo altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean like you always look at Japan and like especially the last 20 years, almost 15, 20 years, it's always been Iwata, Miyamoto and Anuma,
Right.
and like they're the faces of that company, like especially Miyamoto. Like the day he leaves this planet, like
It's it's
Nintendo is going to be a very, very, very different company.
yes.
It's almost like that company, like the spirit of that company won't survive. Nintendo will survive, but the spirit of that company, like 1/3 of that spirit is gone. And like once like Anuma and Miyamoto leave or pass away or something, like the spirit of that company is gone. Like it's just
And I think but the thing I what I like and I hope that they're doing is that they're working with new developers and making new directors and be like you see what they have learned from Anuma and Miyamoto and Iwata. And who Yoshi's Woolly World. Because he's important too. I keep forgetting his name. Because he also helped Miyamoto do Mario. So like people like that, I'm like, if they are training the new developers and making new directors and stuff, it's important for us as gamers to support it. Like we'll miss the old, but let's continue and be respectful by probably purchasing these new directors because they work under our past developers that we miss.
Right.
You know,
And like we look at games like Splatoon, which was a totally new young team of Nintendo developers. Like
right,
nobody of the old guard was on that team, like for the most part. And like that game turned out great. And like Pikmin, I know Miyamoto was like the director of that game, but like that was a whole young team. And we look at intelligent systems with Fire Emblem and Retro,
right.
what they've done. Like Nintendo's got the talent after after the old guard is gone. And like you said, it is up to us as Nintendo fans to support them even when the old guard is gone. But
And
it's still gonna be a sad day.
like, and it's sad to say that um me as a gamer, it's sad to say that I can't do any of that. I can't feel that same way with Sony and Microsoft. I know they have talented developers, they work with talented third party, but I'm just like, they don't have the impact that Nintendo has had on my life when it comes to video games. And with the developers that made the games that's become big franchises and kind of make what video games are today. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Satoru Iwata will be missed.
He's dirty miss.
Yeah, he was a special part of that company for a long time, and like he got them out of like he got them out of that rut that Nintendo was in. I feel like, I mean, I know he had Miyamoto and Onuma, and like, but like the GameCube was, kind of looked at by the industry as almost a failure, and he brought a whole new world of gaming to Nintendo with the Wii and the DS, and like he renewed a lot of people's faith in that company. He renewed a lot of what makes that company great, and he brought in a whole new group of gamers. I mean, that's like what the casual market is now. We look at phones and stuff, all these apps and stuff, you can contribute to what made the Wii successful, and that vision was Iwata's. So,
and a lot of people, I to me personally, a lot of people feel regret of not supporting old Nintendo products. Like I'm hearing people now be like, I wish I got a GameCube when the system came out, but I was so big on everything else, trying to keep up and be very competitive and stuff. I missed on some like really good games, and now people are trying to look for the GameCube and look for games still for that system because they miss it and they regret of not picking it up. And Nintendo, I think only Nintendo kind of has that power. Like if you don't get the system and that game and those games at that time, trust me, you're going to be paying some money to get it.
yeah.
And then realize that I should have played this when this came out instead of playing this game because this game was a letdown.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so many people were into the PS2 at the time, and like Xbox was making it big with Halo and stuff, that like GameCube kind of got lost in a lot of people's minds. Now, I got a GameCube on launch day because it came out on my birthday, and like they had one left at the GameStop, and I wanted the black one, but they only had a purple one, and now I'm glad I have the purple one because it's so iconic and so just,
It's weird. I still have my black one, but I have the Game Boy Advance player underneath it.
Yeah, I have that too. It's sitting underneath my GameCube. It's I'm so glad I got that thing when I did, because that thing was like that thing was so hard to find afterwards.
I'm playing it with the GameCube controller, but you can check the second episode of DNR or with the third episode. Last week's episode of DNR where we were talking about the GameCube controller.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, Anyways, Satoru Iwata will be missed, especially by us for sure, for sure. But let's get into our second topic. It's a little bit brighter.
Yay.
Nintendo 64 turns 20 this year, and I just
Wow.
kind of want to talk about our favorite experiences, our favorite games before we get out of here. So, Nintendo 64 was a very decisive console for me because growing up, I had NES because my cousin gave me his when he bought a Sega Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
And when, like, after I got an NES, I wanted a Sega Genesis because he had a Sega Genesis. He's like, I've always looked up to him. He's kind of like my brother because he lived with us for a while, and I was an only child, and I kind of just looked up to him as a brother. But like, I wanted a Sega Genesis because he had a Sega Genesis, and he had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on there, Hyperstone Heist, which is essentially Genesis version of Turtles in Time, but
with a mix of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game.
Not so much. It was just a kind of a remixed version of Turtles in Time. It didn't have as many levels. Bosses were on different levels than they were in Turtles in Time. There was certain bosses missing. It was weird because like the Super Nintendo, obviously it was more powerful, but like I don't really know how it all worked, but like at the end of that cycle, N64 was starting to come around, and I got Nintendo Power, and there's a very distinct magazine that had it had Dixie Kong on the front because they were pushing Donkey Kong Country 3 real hard, but it had N64 screenshots in it. It had, at the time, Zelda 64. It had Mario 64. It had, all these awesome looking Nintendo games. And I was like,
and that's when the system was codenamed Ultra 64.
Yeah. And I was like, man, I want one of these. But then I was like, well, I didn't have a Super Nintendo. So what if I got a Super Nintendo because it's real cheap? And because this was my logic. Super Nintendo was cheap. So if I bought a cheap system, I could get more games. That was my logic as like 10-year-old me, 11-year-old me. So I had all these charts, and I like wrote down pros and cons of each system. Like, this is the new system. This is what everybody's going to be talking about. But I missed Super Nintendo. And I decided to ask for a Nintendo 64 for Christmas. And I remember running downstairs, and my grandma had come over, and she buys me so many presents. She used to buy me so many presents. And like, she bought me, there's these two big square boxes, and I couldn't tell what they were. I thought they were like VHS tapes or something. And I opened them up, and it was it was Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wings 64. And I was like kind of upset because I didn't have a Nintendo 64, and I really thought she was going to get it for me. But then I opened my parents' gifts, and that N64 was there, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I got a Nintendo 64!" And like, I didn't even open the rest of my gifts. That I literally opened the Nintendo 64 and plugged in the TV and started playing Mario 64. And then like, I remember like a year, like the next Christmas, like I got the stocking out like while we were decorating, and there was so many gifts in the stocking from the previous Christmas because I didn't open any of them because I was so excited I got an N64.
Trust me, I understand I understand how you feel, because I opened all my other gifts, but I disappeared with my N64. I literally disappeared for hours.
Yeah, and I was like, I had to play Super Mario 64, and I just had to play it. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to see my family. I was like, I'm going behind the couch, because that's where my little TV was behind her couch, so my parents could
Right.
use the main one and still keep an eye on me. And I have to play this game. I unplugged my Sega Genesis, I unplugged my NES, and I just moved them aside and I was like, gotta play Mario 64. And then I tried out Pilot Wings. I was like, no, I gotta play Mario 64.
And it's so weird because coming from the N64 and PlayStation era, like I kind of got used to the PlayStation controller and stuff like that. But once I played Mario 64, I kind of was just like a whole different world. Like my thing was I want to learn how this game controls. I don't care about getting the stars. I want to see how this game controls. And it was a life changer for me. Just like, oh my goodness, I didn't know Nintendo was this creative and thinking of putting Mario in 3D. Like it was just fun. And you just wanted more and more.
Yeah. I remember going into that first door because like it didn't have a number on it and you couldn't open any of the other doors. And
Right.
like when you first start that game, you don't really know what the numbers on the door means. You think it's like, oh, well, that's world 1 and this is world 3, and up at the top that's the Bowser door. So obviously Bowser, you got to fight Bowser. And like I thought this game was going to be like super short. I didn't realize that you could go downstairs and there was a second Bowser door, and then the stairs up to the top of the castle like had a third Bowser. Like I was just amazed at how big this game was.
Right. To
So
be
I
on the
went,
cart.
yeah, seriously, to be on one cartridge, like this game was huge, and I like all like every single world was like a mini open world that you could go and do whatever you wanted, and there was so many objectives in each world, and like you had to backtrack. It was amazing.
Yes. I
I
remember seeing the big chump for the first time, and I was just like, "Wait, what?" Like amazed, like literally amazed when I seen that. I was just in a whole another like state of mind at that time.
Yeah, and after Christmas, like I had spent a whole probably 2 or 3 weeks in that first world, like just messing around and trying to get all the stars in that first world before I moved on, not
Uh-huh.
realizing I had to backtrack because I don't know, I wasn't smart like that. And I went then like right after New Year's to go get the strategy guide. I was like, I got some money. I'm gonna go buy the strategy guide. You should see my Mario 64 strategy guide. It's a mess. It's terrible. There's like magic marker notes written in it. There's like arrows drawn all over it. The cover is falling off. I had to tape the cover on like 3 different times.
Wow.
It's trashed. But like once I discovered, not Jolly Roger Bay. Jolly Roger Bay?
I think
The
so.
the water level, and then you can go outside in that courtyard where the boo is, and then when you go downstairs there's the lava world, and then like once you look up at the top of the castle where the painted sun is, you got the wings, and that was like the first major power up, and I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, this is amazing. It was so just the way it taught you how to play that game without actually telling you how to play that game, and how like the controller just felt like it was made for that game was
Dang.
just, it was amazing. It
And
was,
then The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time came out, and I was done. I put the controller down when Ocarina of Time came out. I put the controller down, and I wish I had a blog just to thank Nintendo in 500 words and more about giving me this game. Because when I started Ocarina of Time, we'll get back to Mario 64. When I started Ocarina of Time, it changed my whole view on Zelda. I love the franchise, I still love it to this day. But when they put it in 3D, I just lost my mind. I was just like, this is probably one of the best games of all time in my whole life. Cause it's spooky, but yet it's adventurous. And it was just deep. Like this is my first open world game. And I'm just enjoying every minute of it. Okay, back to Mario 64. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to comment on Ocarina of Time.
Oh, go ahead.
Like a lot of people know that it's not exactly my favorite Zelda game, but like I still remember the first time I ever played it. Like before that, like I didn't have an N64 till after, or I didn't have a Super Nintendo until after N64 came out.
Mhm.
So I hadn't played Link to the Past yet. My only Zelda experience was Zelda 1, which for a 4-year-old, you don't know what you're doing in that game. So it doesn't really count. I don't really count that as like my first Zelda game. But the one Zelda game I was completely obsessed with was Link's Awakening for Game Boy. And that was really the only
Yes.
Zelda experience I had until Ocarina of Time. And like once you load up that cart and like you see, they open up with the Deku tree and Navi's talking to it, and you just see the camera start flying through Navi's point of view, and you
Yeah.
see the village for the first time, and you see all of the Kokiri, like you see all the elves walking around, and you see like Navi hit the fence trying to fly through it, and then you see the camera shake her head and like waking up Link for the first time, and then you climb down and you talk to Saria for the first time, and then like it just lets you go.
Exactly. It felt it gave you kind of a cinematic experience because Nintendo wasn't known for anything like that. And
Right.
I think Ocarina of Time was to me, Ocarina of Time was the first to do that. And I just love that game. I can't.
Yeah, and like the closest thing I can really compare that to is like that opening sequence in Mario 64 where like you see the guy with the camera, I always forget his name, like floating around, and then you like Peach reads the letter, and then you see like from the camera's point of view, like flying underneath the bridge and around, and you see the warp pipe come up and Mario comes out. But like Zelda was so much grander, and I didn't like I knew that just from playing Link's Awakening. Okay, I have to find a sword and I have to find a shield, and I found the shield in the shop, obviously,
Right.
and I thought the sword was going to be in that first dungeon. So I couldn't get past what's his name, Milo, the one that's guarding the door, and
Yeah.
then like I saw you go up on that platform where you can like cut the signs like after you get the sword, and I found the hole, and then I got killed by that rock like 3 different times trying to
Oh
like
wow.
time it up because I told you I'm real bad at games, and it started early, but I found the chest with the sword, and I was like, yes, I'm ready to go. And just exploring the Great Deku Tree dungeon for the first time, like multiple levels, like because in Link's Awakening you don't really experience that multi-level thing like you do in Link
Right.
to the Past. Seeing a Zelda dungeon with multiple levels and multiple layers for the first time, the
And then
puzzles
the
that you
puzzles, and then having Z targeting, that was a game changer for me because I'm like, how would this? Oh, this is what. Okay, and it stayed. Yeah. Okay, continue. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
oh no, I mean, it was just an experience that I had never had before, and like I mean, everybody knows the struggle I had trying to beat that game because I didn't realize you could go back in time until I got the strategy guide like a year later, and then that's why Majora's Mask to this day is still my favorite Zelda on N64. But that's
It's so funny that you speak about the strategy guide because I got to where the desert is at, where the
Mhm.
girls where you have to sneak, and I couldn't figure it out. And that's the first time that I have brought a strategy guide for Zelda. I've never brought in a strategy guide for Zelda. The only in my whole lifetime of strategy guides, besides some of the free ones that I get from work, um, the only three ones that I brought ever in my whole, well, two that I brought in my whole life was Secret of Mana and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. My cousin gave me his Super Metroid strategy guide for free. But those only three strategy guides I had in my whole life. Once I figured out that once I figured out the desert part, I didn't even use the rest of the strategy guide. I
See,
didn't.
my Ocarina of Time one looks worse than my Super Mario one because I'm like, I still have this stupid sticky note on the
Uh-huh.
page of the Shadow Temple where I'm like, go back in time, idiot. That's like that's what this sticky note has. I'll have to take a picture the next time I'm over at my parents' house and like flip open to that page, and I'll put it on the community page or something. But like it said, go back in time, you idiot.
I know. Doing the volleyball kind of fight with Gan, with was it the
Phantom Ganon.
yes, that was it was weird to me because I've never done anything like that. I think it's in a link between a link between worlds, a link to the past, but doing that in 3D with Ganon, like a link between a link to the past. I gotta get that right. A link to the past. I had completely forgot all about doing something like that. But Ocarina of Time doing that boss battle, I was just like, okay, I'm playing volleyball with this Dark Ganon. And okay, he's failed. Swipe, swipe. Like I rode to attack him like quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. It was Ocarina of Time is such a special game to the point like it changed everything. It literally changed everything. Like Mario 64 changed the way we perceived a character in a 3D space.
And
Zelda,
with analog, well, Nintendo did analog, so
Zelda changed everything else. The way you fight in the 3D space, the Z targeting, the world building, the like the puzzles, the dungeons, the combat, the boss battles. It changed everything that people still use to this day.
And different genres of video games.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you can still see like the bow and arrow mechanic is still being used in games like Tomb Raider and Horizon. You know,
right.
Targeting is still being used. You know, it's all there. You can see it in every single game that we play today.
It's the best way to play Uncharted 4.
And like I dare someone to point at a PlayStation game that changed everything we perceive about games. Like, okay, Final Fantasy VII put the 2D JRPG in a 3D space, but it still didn't change the genre.
Yeah, no.
Like, Metal Gear might be the closest thing on PlayStation to Zelda.
I don't even think Metal Gear did it because Metal Gear is something that play the first Metal Gear on NES and then play Metal Gear Solid. I bet you will mention more of Solid than you will mention the first of the first Metal Gear. Because when it comes to the first Metal Gear, it's the dog is asleep or the mistranslation of that gets talked about more than Metal Gear itself. You know, Solid just made it just kind of invented the stealth genre a little bit, and really brought Hideo Kojima into the limelight. Like,
right, but it still didn't do the types of things that Ocarina of Time did, which is why Nintendo followed that blueprint all the way to Breath of the Wild. Like, it's very clear that that blueprint was used in almost every game except for maybe Majora's Mask. And even then, like, the dungeons are still designed the same. It's just the way that story is presented and like the 3-day cycle is different, but like the dungeons are still the same. It still uses the same mechanics. Like, you know, and that's why Twilight Princess I feel like is still my favorite Zelda game, because it's literally just a better version of Ocarina of Time in every possible way. I feel like
and it's to me it's well, I think the Legend of Zelda itself, like just the series itself, besides maybe Majora, well, I won't say Majora's Mask because I will include that one too. They pretty much have the best dungeon designs, even if you don't care about their water temples and stuff like that. You have to admit that
I still don't understand why people think the water temples are hard. I for some reason I've never had trouble with a water temple.
It because there's too much backtracking and you got to do some workarounds to get water to flow this way and stuff. And definitely with Ocarina of Time, you kept having to pause the game to put on the shoes, then pause it off, and just that being problematic and
Okay.
stuff. But you kind of got to hand it to Nintendo that when it comes to Zelda and when it comes to dungeons, they make the best ones. They the only ones that make the best ones. Because Capcom, they did the Game Boy games, and they get talked about and respected a lot. But when it comes to dungeons, Ocarina of Time is still like one of the classics. Twilight Princess still has some of my favorite dungeons. Wind Waker still have some of my favorite dungeons. Like I keep telling everybody, with Twilight Princess, I love going in the sand dungeon and getting my the clock thing. I still think that's one of the best boss fights I have ever done in the Zelda franchise. I'm mad that that when you get that item, the Dreidel of Death, people call it, when you get that item. Because I'm a lover of roller coasters, I hate the fact that that section is really short.
Yeah.
Like I really just want to use that a lot, but I'm like, when you get into the game and you see it, you be like, okay, this is going to take me to new heights, and you go adventure and backtrack in order to get into that and use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Zelda N64 in general, like that whole system changed a lot of things, and like we haven't even touched on like what Rares did for the N64.
Perfect Dark,
Perfect Dark, 007, Banjo-Kazooie, even Conker's Bad Fur Day. Like
Jet Force Gemini. We haven't even touched about the Rumble Pack of the N64. How that changed controllers. Like to this very day, Rumble is almost in every controller that you play. That force feedback. Like the N64 started that. And having the 4-player controller port connected to the system, like you didn't have to buy a multi-tap like you did back in the day. Like it was into the system. Like Nintendo doesn't get props for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things overlooked that Nintendo's done. Like even going all the way back to like NES and the D-pad, like they still hold the patent on the D-pad. Like it's still theirs.
Yeah.
And nobody else can take that design. And like the closest thing that it even remotely is good in terms of D-pad is the PlayStation's like button D-pad thing, but like it's still Nintendo's is so much better. Like I was probably a couple months ago, I was talking to my cousin and we were comparing the NES D-pad to the 3DS's D-pad, and it's still identical. Like it's identical and it works and it's amazing, and it's
right.
And then we moved to the analog stick, which you could argue that the DualShock, when it came out with its dual analog stick, was better for the industry, but Nintendo gave us the analog stick. Moving a character around in a 3D space with an analog stick was way easier than using a D-pad.
Shoot, I'll go even further than that. The Wavebird.
Yeah, wireless controllers. Like Wavebird was the first party wireless controller.
Like people were using the Wavebird in the bathroom in video games. Like that's still crazy to me. But it's just like the Nintendo 64. I mean, it had the games, but it just did so much stuff out the industry that you just never thought they could do.
Yeah.
The res cartridge things they had for like the middle part that you put in for Donkey Kong 64 and other games, like it up-res the games.
Pack?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough things about the Nintendo 64 to like fit in the amount of time that we have left. It's just like you look at start, like even like the games that came out of that, people still talk about fondly. Like we got Smash Brothers, we got Star Fox 64, which
Mario Party that people still like.
Yeah, and it's to this day, Star Fox 64 is still argued to be the best Star Fox game. It's still the best game in that franchise. You know, a lot of games from that era are still argued to be the best in their respective franchises.
Mischief Makers by Treasure,
Yeah.
which is a old company. Resident Evil 2, like my
Yeah,
goodness.
they had that special version of Resident Evil 2 that hinted at the stuff in Resident Evil 0, which was in
Right.
it wasn't in any other version of Resident Evil 2. And
Like
like we got awesome racing games, Mario Kart, Cruising USA.
some of the best wrestling games.
Yeah. Like to this day, people still argue that those like the wrestling games are still better than the ones that come out today.
My friend that I was talking about at Uno's, he was talking about Ken Griffey Jr. on the N64. He still has that cartridge. Oh no! Did I freeze? Oh no! 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 Uh-oh. Did we? Did I lose Corey? This will be edited out. Oh no. Oh no. Well, while Corey comes up, this is still live and recording. Yeah, the Nintendo 64 really um just had a lot. I mean, with the games, just some of the functionalities. I'm like, we didn't even get the disk drive that was planned for the system. Um, but oh, welcome back.
My internet went out.
Oh
I'm
no.
using the wireless hotspot on my phone now.
Oh.
So that should be good for my phone bill in about 10 days. It's all right.
Oh no. I was just saying, my friend still got Ken Griffey Jr. For the N64, but we didn't even get to. We might probably about to be wrapping up because I know you have things to do. We didn't get even the disk drive, the 64 DD that was supposed to come to America, but who knows what that would have led to for the N64 in terms of games, and I think that probably would have been our first introduction to downloadable content.
Yeah. Yeah, and like even moving on to the GameCube, like you can still see parts of the ideas of what that disk drive might have been. I just feel like so many ideas. I feel like Nintendo wanted to do more with the N64, but they didn't have enough time to utilize their ideas because they're like, because of for you youngsters out there, life cycles of consoles were 4 to 5 years max. Right. So like, I feel like they just didn't have enough time before they felt like they had to push out another product, and it's crazy because all the way up until the GameCube launched, like we were still getting like maybe 3 or 4 years into the N64's life cycle, we were still getting Super Nintendo games. We were still getting NES games well into the Super Nintendo. I think Mega Man 6 came out in what, 93 or 94? Well, into Super Nintendo's life cycle.
And Mega Man X was coming out.
I know. I think they came out of like within like what, 8 months of each other, I feel like. So, I mean, Nintendo had so many ideas, and like I always say this about Sega before we wrap up, because Sana's going to be really upset if I'm late for dinner. But I always say like Sega Sega iterated on its consoles. Don't worry, I'm wrapping this back around to N64. Sega always felt like they were ahead of their time. 32X. Saturn had some missteps, but they had some good ideas there. Dreamcast with online gaming and moving into the past the 64-bit era. And I feel like Nintendo was heading that direction with N64. N64 with, the expansion pack, the expansion bay. They had the 64 DD that you mentioned that never came out here. Ideas for DLC and stuff. You would probably purchase them at the store on a disc for your games, which is how Master System came about, or Master Quest for Ocarina of Time came about.
And 7-Elevens in Japan were doing it. You go up with your DD and your download from there, and then you can take it home. Like they was doing that in Japan. It probably would have worked here, like at Funkoland at that time, I think. I don't think GameStop was out. But anyway.
Yeah, so there was rumored to even be like a Metroid game in development for the 64 DD, and which probably ended up being Metroid Prime because they moved it over to the GameCube. But and that's what was so exciting about Smash Brothers was like that was our first 3D model of Samus, and what kind of characters can we add to this franchise? Like that was my first thought when like they revealed the 64 DD and like I was first reading about it, and then Smash came out. That was my first thought was, how do we add characters to Smash? How do we add things to games? Like me and Brian would talk about that kind of stuff. Like his favorite game was Gauntlet Legends for N64. I never forget him sitting and playing Gauntlet Legends for hours upon hours. And like when the 64 DD came out, we were talking about because he was really into Diablo 2 at the time also. And we were talking about what if they do like Diablo style stuff where they add levels to Gauntlet Legends, or they add stuff to games. And like that was a conversation we were having in the early 2000s with this thing. So I don't know. It's N64 was such a special system. Like Banjo-Kazooie is still my favorite platformer to this day.
Sassy Blackbird.
So
we'll have to do a part 2 next week. We're really gonna have to continue this discussion next week, because this is such a Nintendo 64 is such a big topic, and the importance to what that console did to the industry. So we're gonna have to do part 2 next week. Any final thoughts before we get out of here? Just if you have a Wii U, or if you have a Wii and you're still able to go for Wii, definitely if you're able to go to the virtual console and download some of the N64 games, I recommend Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64. If you have a Wii U, you can still download those games, and even with Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Like if there's games that's on, if you have a Wii or Wii U, when they have the N64 games, I say download them. You might not like the graphics because, of course, it's a modern time, but the design in those games, you could get an idea of what they were when we played them when they first came out. So I do recommend that.
Yeah, and even if you don't have access to that and you have a 3DS, like Ocarina of Time's on there. I don't know how much a Mario 64 DS cart would cost at this point, but like you can still play that game. The Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D games are both probably the ideal way to play those games at this point, especially Majora's Mask, because they did a bunch of stuff with the time mechanic that makes that game so much more bearable. And I know from experience, because I played Majora's Mask 2 months before the 3D version came out.
Wow.
And I can tell you, man, that game, waiting around in that game for a certain time to happen when you're on a quest is brutal. But yeah, we're gonna have to continue this discussion next week. This topic is so fascinating, and maybe we'll do retrospectives on all the consoles in the coming weeks, because Nintendo has just been such an important part of our gaming lives. Like it's just that's just how it happens. So,
because I know definitely for me, the Super NES and the GameCube, those two systems are just like, I feel like the NES is the foundation of getting me into Nintendo, and the Super Nintendo and the GameCube just takes it beyond that. Don't get me wrong, the N64 changed a lot for the modern generation of video games.
Yeah, it did. But we're gonna get out of here. We'll have a bigger Nintendo 64 discussion next week. I didn't realize how much we were going to be talking about N64 until we started. And I'm like, man. And, we would keep going, but I have to be at dinner. So, Edward, it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
If you haven't checked it out, Edward's first blog is up on digitalnerdadvocates.com. You should check it out.
And the new one is coming soon about Uncharted 4 and games of that nature.
Yeah. And I have 2 that I'm working on that should be coming out in the next week or so. So I'm actually going to work on them while I'm on vacation this weekend because I cannot get away from this. I refuse to not work while I'm on vacation. So, check out DNA Power Block every Tuesday. I apologize. This episode is a little late, but you know what? You'll get over it. It's okay. Edward, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
This has been DNA Power Block. You can find it on digitalnerdadvocates.com or our YouTube channel, Digital Nerd Advocates Network. Like, subscribe, share. And until next time. Oh, listen to Edward's podcast, World 1 and Optional Opinion. And until next time, we're out.
Bye.